so we're going to get started today. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm Teresa Lyson, a business solutions consultant at NACC. Today's topic is favoring feedback, embracing conversations to move us forward with Brenda Meeker. Brenda is passionate about supporting others in their personal and professional growth. As owner and president of Elevate Consulting LLC, she provides learning and development, HR, and project-based solutions to meet organizational and employee development needs. Brenda has experience in training, meeting facilitation, human resources, managing projects and events, and developing communication plans and messages. She has worked in corporate and nonprofit settings in D1 athletics, providing a range of experience that informs her work. Brenda earned a bachelor's degree from Northwestern College in St. Paul, Minnesota, and an MBA from Drake University in Des Moines. She cheers for those college teams as well as Iowa State Cyclones. Go Cy! She's a great example that growth is possible for anyone, as she no longer cheers against and even can be caught cheering for the Iowa Hawkeyes after becoming a house divided. If you have any questions throughout Brenda's presentation, please add them to the Q&A or chat boxes at the bottom of your screen. We will save time at the end of the webinar to answer those. And so with that, I will turn it over to Brenda.
Thank you, Teresa. And yes, all the schools in Iowa are doing pretty well, I think, in basketball anyways. But my Cyclones, as of today, #2 in the country for the first time ever. So super happy just on that very personal note. But yes, I am proof that change can happen. My husband is happy with that as well, since he's the Hawkeye. I am really grateful to be here with you today to talk about feedback. I think it's a deeply important topic. And I know we only have a small amount of time to work together, but I will give some pauses to let you really think about some things, think of your own examples, apply this to your life and your work. And the chat is active, so please feel free to interact together in that space. So as we move forward with this, less than 30 minutes, here's what I hope for us to accomplish today. We are going to explore the importance of feedback together so that when you leave, you will have some tips that you can apply and some techniques that will strengthen the feedback you hopefully are already giving or help you feel more confident in those conversations going forward. And then I want us to also take some time to recognize aspects of a culture that can foster an environment where everyone can give feedback to each other. So we will, I trust, have at least one thing that you can walk away with in this short amount of time. Maybe it's something new you hadn't considered before. Maybe it's simply a reminder that you need to implement, but I trust that we can tackle that here together. As we get started, I want you to think about the best feedback you have ever received and what made it great. Was it how it was delivered to you? Was it the person who shared it? Perhaps it was the awareness that it brought, or you realized the impact that it had on you. Maybe it was something else. For me, I think back several years. It was my first job out of college, and I was in a position that I had actually gotten to know my leader because I interned at that organization twice prior to joining them full time. And he was giving me feedback about something. I don't remember specifically the feedback that he was sharing, but I remember the feedback after that because my reaction to the initial feedback was to be defensive. Have to tell you how I'm, my work is good, I'm right, whatever it was, right? Very much defending myself. And he said, "Brenda, stop. I'm trying to help you." Whew. I'm pretty sure I responded then defensively because that's all I knew. But this many years later, I still sit with that feedback. The feedback people give me is trying to help me. So instead of wanting to defend, I recognize when that's about to start and I can stop myself. Probably not all the time, if I'm honest, but I have a chance to actually listen to what's being said because people are simply just trying to help. Now, I want you to think about feedback in general. You might have thought about something that, is really helpful for you, but I want you to think in general. What do you really think? And you can, if you're comfortable in the chat, you can put up, down, or sideways, but maybe even in your own space. Give a thumbs up if you love feedback, you want to hear it. Thumbs down if you do not like it, you want to avoid it. And a sideways thumb if you're somewhere in between. For me, I'm thumbs up all the way. I love feedback and I love the opportunity to hear how it can make me better. And I'm probably potentially a little annoying about it because I'll ask, how do you think that went? What could be better? Right. But what I want us to recognize is that if we were in the same physical space or we could see each other, we probably had a mix of thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs to the side. Usually more thumbs up and sideways than down, but there's can be a mix. And if there's a mix in this group, there's a mix with the people that we work with. And I want us to recognize that. And when you think about the potential for why that is, there's several reasons. Maybe we've gotten some feedback that was just so harsh that it kind of set us back on our heels and now we just don't want to hear it. Or maybe it was the person who delivered it didn't really have our growth and wanting to help us in mind. Maybe we don't hear feedback all that often, and therefore when we do, we're not quite sure what to do with it. Or what about if we only hear the negative, constructive, and we're never given any positive reinforcement? It's a lot of baggage, if you will, that you can get from just different experiences that we've all brought with us. And so consider that as you're sharing, but also as you receive what you might be carrying with you. Now, I want us to think about why this matters. Like, why do we even care about how we give feedback, how we receive it? And there's some research that says that it can be helpful and that there's opportunity for growth. So Gallup does extensive research in a lot of areas, one of which is employee engagement. And they have research that says that employees are significantly more likely to be engaged when they receive feedback from their manager a few times a week or more. A few times, gosh, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? And I would contend that it depends on what we think a feedback conversation is, right? If we feel like we have to sit down and have a lengthy conversation, then yes, that seems like a lot. There are many in the moment opportunities that go much quicker to share feedback. Now, there's some newer data out there that says only 27% of employees say they would like to receive feedback from their manager at least weekly. So Gallup says managers at least a few times, and employees are like, well, maybe once a week. So that doesn't seem to align. So what do we do with that? Now, Gallup would say, and I would tend to agree based on anecdotal evidence, that it's about the value of the feedback. Only 26% of employees strongly agree that feedback they receive helps them do better work. It's not valuable, doesn't help. 1 in 4 say that. Now, this statistic is from 2019, so it's a little bit dated, and I've struggled to find the exact language to match that. But if we assume that the 26% here and the 27% on the previous slide align, we have some room for opportunity in general, right? As a population to say, we can be giving feedback better. And so I want you to think about, well, we want it to make a difference, but why, right? Feedback makes a difference. It increases our awareness. Think about the fact that I wasn't aware of my defensiveness or the impact that it was having. Someone brought it up. I'm now aware. Okay. And it doesn't have to be a blind spot. It can be about how we're doing. Are things going well? Are they not? And what do we do with that? If delivered well, we can understand the impact of what we're doing on a situation or on a person, right? You take these first 2 bullets alone, and there's learning that can happen there. And from that, we have an opportunity for change and growth. And when we accept the opportunity to change and grow, and we make a decision about what we'll do differently, we have a chance to step into accountability, to say, you know what, this is what needs to change. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to do it. And then I hold myself to that. Positive feedback provides recognition. It is a form of recognition. You are doing well here. Oh, and guess what? It reinforces, keep doing that. Whatever you're doing, it's working. And here's how I see it working well. Keep doing that. Okay. All of this stuff put together, the feedback, gives an opportunity for increased engagement and retention at work. And when you think about people wanting feedback or needing feedback, and if you break it down by generation, millennials especially want feedback. You're meeting a need and a want. And that also goes back to connecting to engagement and retention. So there's huge opportunity, not to mention the fact that we can get better results when we get the feedback that's helpful. I often like to start with the definition. What are we even talking about? Let's be sure we're on the same page. And so we have feedback here. By definition, it is clear and specific information that's sought or extended with the sole intention of helping individuals, groups, or relationships improve, grow, or advance. Clear and specific. I'm talking about one thing. We're going to have some details around it. I'm not going to muddy it with a bunch of extra commentary that doesn't fit the topic. It's sought. I can ask for it, and we know it's extended. It is given to us whether we ask or not. And intention matters. I think about some feedback I received several years ago from one of my managers. She said, Brenda, you rush around from meeting to meeting, task to task, busy all the time. Now, if she said, I don't like it, I would have thought, oh, okay, that seems like your preference. And, she's my manager, so I probably would have put some weight with her words. But instead, she said, people feel like they can't come talk to you. You seem so busy. They don't come ask for help when they need it. Essentially, what she was saying is, you're not very approachable. That intention is different. It's not about whether she liked it or not. It was about the impact it was having on the people around me that I didn't even see. And so we have to check our intention when sharing that feedback. The best part about that too is that feedback should be actionable. I could do something about that, right? I could say, okay, I'm going to slow down a little bit, give space, maybe even approach others to see how they're doing so that they don't have to come to me first, right? So there's opportunity that I can do to improve things. There are different styles of feedback, different methods you can use. And in the long session, we would go through a framework where I break down a way to have a feedback conversation so that it's truly a conversation, but also follows that definition pretty well. We're going to keep it real simple right now and think about two conflicting styles. One is sharing direct feedback, and I would contend too direct. You come at someone and they're, just piling on the feedback. Here you have it, walk away, right? Well, if that feedback is coming in quick and hard, right, our brain might acknowledge it as a threat. And if you think about how we defend ourselves to a threat, fight or flight. So I will get defensive, or I think, how can I get out of this conversation as soon as possible? And the problem with both of those choices is that we don't hear the feedback, right? We're in our defense mechanism. How do I get past this threat? So the feedback we think we're delivering isn't even heard. The flip side of that then is indirect. And many of us at some point in our lives were taught the cookie approach or the sandwich approach, right? Whatever they labeled it, to say something nice, say what they're doing well, put in that constructive feedback, which is usually what we really want them to hear, and then end it with, but you're doing great, right? And that nice statement. What happens though, right? They're either super confused, like, I don't know what message I was supposed to pick out of that you really want me to hear. Or I hear, wow, I'm doing pretty good. Two positives to one negative, that's pretty awesome. They don't get the message. But if we deliver that feedback, we could walk away thinking, I just delivered the feedback I need them to hear. Things are going to change. They're going to get better. And when they don't, guess what? That's on me. I wasn't clear and specific. And so please, the only cookies that I want us to have are the kind we eat, not the way we deliver our feedback. Okay. So I want to offer to you some tips here that I believe you can take and apply right away to feedback conversations that will help you regardless of the type of feedback you have for someone. So the first topic here is timing. When should you give feedback? Easiest answer is as close to the situation as possible. It's fresh in your mind. It's fresh in their minds. We're not letting things drag out and maybe letting things get worse. If something's not going well, we then get the opportunity to share immediately and get different results much faster. Now, there are some caveats to that, though. So let's say we are in a situation where we're all running to the next thing, right? The next meeting. We just don't have time to talk through it right now. Or what if emotions are running high? Like things did not go well. And either one of you can't handle the conversation right now from the emotional state standpoint. It's okay to delay that, right? Like get into a better headspace, be able to have a good conversation. Don't delay too long. Don't wait for the performance review. Don't wait to the one-on-one at the end of the month. Have a conversation. When you think about duration, it doesn't really need to be all that long. Have a good conversation. We don't need to belabor the point, but we do want to be able to give it some space in that moment. So that few times a week seems a little easier when you think about, man, they can really be fairly quick. Frequency, I believe, matters. And I look at this from a couple of different standpoints. One is, how often am I sharing feedback in general? And for many of us, it's probably not enough. Especially if you think about positive feedback, right? Well, they should know they're doing well, or they told me, oh, just, tell me when things need to get better, right? And I would contend we have to give that positive feedback quite a bit. So think about that. But also, if you're leading a team where you have the opportunity to share feedback as a member of a team, are you sharing it consistently across and making sure everyone gets feedback when they need it? Or is it usually directed at one or two people, right? Because we need to spread that wealth as well, and consider how sharing the feedback at a frequency that's helpful will be motivating to them to keep moving forward. If we pile on too much, though, it's an unmotivating factor, things like that. From a mode perspective, face-to-face is ideal. Most of us are now in situations where we're working with people at different locations or maybe only virtually. And so sometimes it's screens on, right? Because then I can see you. Email can be a great follow-up, but it's hard to have a true conversation via email. You can't read tone, you can't read body language, you can't ask quick questions without interpreting what they might have meant, or if you don't understand. So ideally, we're going to do in person, face to face, virtually, or if we need to, even pick up the phone, because hearing people makes a big difference. I always like the idea of pausing. Pause to think, pause before you respond so that you're fully listening to people. In this case, the pause is if the conversation's not going well, if it's getting to a point where it's becoming unproductive, maybe our emotions get a little raised because people are hearing things that could be hard for them to have to tackle. It's okay to pause. We can opt out and say, you know what? I would love to come back to this conversation. Let's come back in half an hour. Or if we see people starting to struggle with the conversation, it's okay to ask if they want and give them permission to take a pause. We'll come back later. Sometimes I have found all people need is the permission to do that. Sometimes people also need to process. I'm one of those people. If I'm hearing information and I need to determine what I'm going to do differently instead, I may not have that answer like right now, especially if it's new information being shared with me or that I hadn't considered before. So give people that time to process. Most of the information we're sharing in this kind of setting is not like we have to know right now, right? Give people the chance to process if they need it, but be sure to circle back to see what decisions are made about how we want to move forward. And then my last tip here for you is ask. Gone should be the days of the no news is good news. I believe we need to ask for feedback to see how we can do better. You can ask your leader, people who report to you, peers, friends, family. And if you could be specific on what you want them to pay attention to, like maybe you're brand new to leading a meeting. And so after a meeting, you check in and say, hey, let me know how I'm doing. What could be better? What could not? And then they know specifically what you're wanting. But I do believe strongly that we need to ask. I've shared a good number of things here. They're listed on the screen, as well as this idea of other. Maybe you have a feedback tip that works really well for you. If you do, throw it in the chat, share it with us. Let that be a learning for all of us. But my question for you would be, based on these things, what do you need to consider and utilize to strengthen how you give feedback? And so I'm going to pause for maybe 20 seconds here and let you think about that. Jot down a note for how you want to move forward. Maybe as we've talked through this, most of you were thinking about sharing constructive feedback. What's not going well, what improvement is needed. And certainly everything we've talked about fits that. It also fits the idea of sharing positive feedback. And this cartoon, I'll give you a second to read it, but this hits me at my core. Baseball is one of my first loves. I was a softball player. I was a pitcher. So this cartoon really resonates with me because when things were going well and I'm striking people out, we're getting people out on the base paths, no one came to tell me I was doing a good job or that the team was doing great. But if I was walking people or a lot of people were on base and scores were, the runs were coming in quick and we couldn't get them out, the catcher or coach would show up. Right? We'd have to talk through some things. The problem is this happens at work too. When things aren't going well, we hear about that. We have to remember to share the positive feedback too. And same tips apply, the same framework applies to how we want to share it, because just a good job probably isn't good enough, right? Let's be specific about it and have a conversation rather than just a passing comment. I want to transition just a little bit here to get away from specific tips necessarily for feedback to this idea of a feedback culture. And by definition, that is an environment where individuals feel free, safe, and encouraged to share and receive feedback. And that individuals piece is really important because that applies to all of us. And there are several things that are required to be able to do this in an organization, but also with how we think about feedback in general. And the first thing is that it starts with the idea that feedback is kind. And I give this kind of silly example, but that most of us can probably relate to, of having food in our teeth. If I walk around all day and I have food in my teeth and I get home and look in the mirror and find out no one told me, it's like, man, I wish someone would have had the courage to say something because I would have fixed it, right? The same idea is true at work. Most of us want to do really good work. And it may be uncomfortable to have the conversation for both parties, but it's the kindest thing we can do so that we can make progress together. Oftentimes, we think about feedback coming from a leader to a direct report. And to get to that individual component in the culture, some things are required. Trust, right? Have I built a relationship with the person? Do I trust that they have my back, that they have my best interest in mind, that they're trying to be kind and helpful? So building that relationship with people does go a long way with how that feedback can be delivered and received. Safety here is psychological safety. Do I believe I can share feedback with others without being made to feel bad, getting in trouble, kind of being shunned and pushed aside? That will increase my ability to take that step forward and share the feedback that will help us all move forward together. Intent matters. We talked about what's my intent in sharing it with you. Do I really see the impact that making a change here because of this feedback will have? But as the recipient of feedback, do I believe that you have good intent with sharing it with me? That will open my ears potentially differently to what you have to say. And then mindset here, it goes back to the kindness piece, but it also has something to do with, do I believe I have something to learn here? Is there an opportunity for learning and growth? And if we believe that we are on this continuum that will never end as long as we're alive, right? That we can grow and change, that affects how we receive feedback and whether we even want it or not. In an ideal world, in a feedback culture, this is what it looks like. Yes, we get feedback from our leaders, but we can also share it with them. And I can share feedback with my peers. Think about how quickly Information can be shared to help us do work better if we could share like that. Right? I can make changes quickly. I hear it from someone who sees it firsthand, who's maybe impacted firsthand, and then we move forward. Now, maybe this isn't what you feel like is available to you in your current culture right now, and that's okay. Regardless of the state of feedback in your life, I believe that all of us have an opportunity to be feedback leaders. We can take steps forward to delivering feedback well and receiving it well. And so I have a few tips here that can help you be a feedback leader if you want to take those steps moving forward. And first is to explain why. Maybe you don't give a lot of feedback right now, or maybe you want to give more of it because you see the impact it could have. You might need to explain why to the team that you work with, why you see feedback as being helpful, that you want to start delivering it more, that you want feedback from them about how those conversations go. That's all fair game. But that why matters. Otherwise, they might say, what webinar did you just attend, right? What'd you learn? And so share that why with folks. Build trust and safety so that those conversations go well. That's a continual process. But that safety piece can also be, happen outside of just the realm of feedback conversations. I think about an example where I was in charge when I worked in Division I athletics of booking travel for a team. And I did not realize when booking travel that the hotel in Indiana, the location in Indiana was not in the central time zone. And if you know anything about athletics, teams like to keep their schedule, especially on game day. And so there's a certain time you eat, a certain time you check out, you go to the arena, you get ready, all the things. Well, when I realized that that team was going to now be an hour off and they were already in Indiana and I was in Iowa, I had a problem. And so I called one of my coworkers and I said, hey, here's the deal. Will you tell coach? Not the smartest thing for me to do. He said, no, you tell coach. So I made the phone call. And that conversation could have changed how I shared information going forward. I could have been yelled at and he could have been very angry. Instead, he said, it's okay, we'll figure it out. Needless to say, I didn't make the mistake again, but that conversation would have changed whether I share in the future or not. It would have impacted our relationship. So these moments for building trust and opportunity or safety happen all the time. When you receive feedback, model good feedback. Listen, really pay attention to what they're saying. Engage in the conversation. Try to learn more. Don't get defensive like I used to, right? And then if someone has the courage to give you feedback, say thank you, because it probably took courage for them to share it. Even the food and the teeth thing, right? That takes some courage. And I'm a big believer in follow-up. So if someone's given you feedback, if you implement something because of that feedback, let them know. And even if you decide to stay status quo, maybe it wasn't something that you must change, but it's something you could change, let them know what you decided. It helps people know they've been heard and that you want their feedback and they'll keep giving it to you. So follow up, let them know the impact that they've had and they've been heard. Again, a short amount of time. I trust that there's at least one nugget here that you can take away. And I encourage you to go implement that. In a full session, we would cover more. We'd get some practice. We'd dig into different questions and be able to address those and learn from each other. If you want that opportunity, you can see Teresa's contact information here. We'd be happy to work with you. And then Teresa, if there are any questions I can answer in the moment, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. Some great takeaways and good things to think about in feedback for manager, just coworkers even. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A or the chat box now. While we wait for that, I'll ask you to please stay on for a quick poll that will pop up on your screen as a brief evaluation of today's session, and let you know, like Brenda said, this is just a small chunk of what she can bring to your company for a good training session on feedback. So please reach out to me if you want more information on that, or on Brenda. She's got a whole library of trainings that she offers that we could easily partner up with and bring Brenda into you today. So I'm not seeing any questions, but feel free to drop them in if you if you have any. Here's one, Brenda. Jason asks, do you have any tips for receiving feedback?
Yes. So from a receiving feedback standpoint, I believe in the active listening and being able to ask some follow-up questions so that you're getting as much learning as you can from the feedback they're sharing. Um, if you are approached with the cookie approach, right? I would encourage really digging into that as well and saying, okay, here's what I'm hearing you saying, and maybe focus in on the constructive part to see what you can learn from that, because that's probably the true message that they're trying to give you. I also encourage, if you need it, ask for the pause. Because if you're hearing something, you can feel the defensiveness like I can sometimes try to kick in. Take some breaths, but also ask for that pause if you need to come back to that conversation, and then do. Hopefully their intent is that they're trying to help.
If we take any more questions, if anyone has them, we are at 3:30. But I'm not seeing any more questions. So thank you all for joining us today and for joining Brenda. And Brenda, thank you for taking time to share about feedback with us all.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciated your time.